Good evening, everybody, or good morning. Welcome to lecture number 16. Today we're going to talk about histology and the equine connection, because this is another important part in understanding how the body heals and what to do or not to do when you have certain problems. And then we will talk about trimming the unlevel hoof. If there is enough time after the questions and answers, I'll be glad to share a few things from the clinic that I attended this weekend in Washington State with Brian Hampson about the wild brumbies in Australia. Let's start with talking about histology. It's the study of microscopic anatomy of cells and tissues in plants and animals. But how does that make any sense for the hoof trimmer? Before I go any further, I would like to put a disclaimer here. I am not giving medical advice, veterinary advice. Please do not construe this as the same. I'm sharing with you what I have learned, what I have asked if it's true, if those teachings are elsewhere the same. I had this afternoon a conversation with Dr. Cook about this, and he says he totally agrees, but I do not tell you what to do with your horse or with your client's horses. In any case where you have the slightest doubt, please consult a veterinarian about this. I am not a replacement for the veterinarian. So let's go to histology and the equine connection. As you have learned in earlier lectures, one of the tissues in the horse's lower leg are tendons, and these tendons and ligaments are made out of collagen fibers. Collagen fibers are a very tough material. They are flexible, they resist tension, they stretch only very little and are capable of bearing great loads. Great loads means 600 kilo, that is about 1,500 pounds, maybe 1,400, per square centimeter. A square centimeter is a quarter an inch, a square inch. So they can really bear huge loads. And these huge loads can be borne day in and day out. However, under great force, they will undergo irreversible stretching and tear. Now, when this tear occurs, even in small sections, you have to understand that the collagen fibers are oriented in the direction of tension, which requires any healing process to take place under light load bearing. If the tendon does not heal under light load bearing, then it will produce scar tissue. That means these collagen fibers that run in the direction of the tendon will be laid down crosswise and will produce some scar tissue, and that scar tissue is always susceptible to being re-injured. So what does that mean, light load bearing? Light load bearing in our understanding is with the horse you would allow the horse to move around on an injured tendon as he sees fit. That means you have to not put him in a stall, he can't move around in a stall, but put him somewhere where he has a very quiet, benign body so they don't wrestle and fight, and where he can put weight on the limb as he is starting to heal. And horses have a very good feel for that. You would too. If you would not get a cast on, if you would not be put on bed rest, you would move around. And I know this from myself when I got injured, even with broken bones. I just stepped on it as much as I dared, and not a hair more, because that would hurt more than I could bear. And it's the same for horses. So keeping them out on non-concussive ground, may this be rubber mats, may this be grass, whatever you have, where it is very even so they don't stumble and fall, would be the right environment for light load bearing. Ligaments connect bone to bone, we had established that, and can also only heal under load bearing. This exactly the same as the tendons. I have had quite a few horses in my care in the past that were given to me because they had been on stall rest for, one had been on stall rest for 9 months with a collateral ligament damage, whatever that means. And after 9 months of stall rest, they took him out, and for a few days he was doing rather well, and then he deteriorated again because this had actually not healed. They were tired of paying the board and the price for this, so they gave him to me. I took the shoes off. It took him 8 weeks without shoes and a correct trim, and the horse was sound. Now, I'm not saying he had collateral ligament damage. I said that was what he was diagnosed with, and that was what he was laid up with. But once he had full function of his hoof again, he healed up quite nicely and he came quite soon sound. Same thing happened with the second horse, not with the same diagnosis, but with a very similar hoof form when he came to me, and that second horse was sound earlier even, but he had never been laid up. Cartilage contains no nerves, and only the lateral cartilage contains blood vessels. We had established that. Cartilage can heal optimally only under load bearing and movement. Excuse me. That is also very important to remember. If you have damaged cartilage or cartilage that was worn away or worn thin in a joint because the horse had incorrect hoof form and was higher on one side than the other and joint adaptation took place, this cartilage gets nourished from the synovial fluid through in the joint cavity through infusion and expression. So there has to be weight bearing on the cartilage in order to nourish it. Without nourishment it will not regrow, even if the space is there. So this horse that you have some joint issues with, needs to move and bear weight. The lateral cartilages, often when they bear a lot of weight, when they have quite some concussion from very hard ground, these lateral cartilages will ossify. We know this to be side bone. When you have side bone in a horse, it is usually diagnosed as a reason for lameness. It does not have to be always the reason for lameness. I personally think that it is just often blamed for that, but it is not really the reason for lameness, because it happens in a lot of horses that are doing just fine, they are moving just fine, but in radiographs you can see the side bone, and so instantly it is blamed for the lameness in existence. However, again, if these horses are well trimmed, and I have had this happen as well, the lateral cartilage still was ossified and the horse was moving sound again. So I am much questioning if side bone, at a lesser degree probably than here, but side bone in general is always responsible for lameness. But this side bone can also be only reversed with movement. And finally, bone breaks at times, and when that happens and the bone is not weight-bearing, does not get a chance to reorient in the break area, the trabecular bone, that are these little structures inside the bone that fill out the hollow with very fine trabecular or cancellous bone, if they have to heal also in the direction of tension, and only then does the bone heal properly without calcification in the wrong areas, where this calcification makes the bone susceptible to re-injury. So you see this here in that bone, how this is all on the inside, hollow with these very fine structures, which makes the bone fairly lightweight. If it would be all the compact bone that is on the outside, if this would be through and through compact bone, this bone would become very heavy. So again, broken bone, simple fractures heal the best under light load bearing. In this context, I would like to show you a radiograph here with side bone, and so that you can see it better, I'll outline it first. It is about here, and then I take this away again, and now I hope you can see it. It's actually where the finger points. The finger is not pointing to the side bone, the finger is actually holding the radiograph against the light source. So this is side bone, and while we are at this radiograph, we may as well talk about the next part, and that is here. This is arthritic changes, also known as ring bone. And then he has some ossification, some proliferation of the periosteum up here, which I do not dare to say what that is. But all of this could or could not lead to symptoms of lameness. Here we have the same unfortunate horse from the other side, other hoof. You'll see again quite a bit of side bone here. And here you have ring bone on this joint. It looks to me as if the ring bone has not invaded the joint space, and therefore the horse may have full mobility here. However, on the coffin joint, it looks as if this here has already started to crust over the entire joint, at least between the extensor process and the frontal part of the short pastern bone. And when that happens, then you don't have, as a trimmer, you don't have a chance to rehabilitate this with trimming and movement, because a joint that doesn't move will not rehabilitate. You have to have movement in order to rehabilitate the joint. Into histology and our understanding with the equine connection belongs this as well. Muscles can only contract. They do not support. They cannot actively stretch. They only can contract. It's just something to remember. Let's talk about nerve function and the hoof. The function of nerves depends on circulation. Nerves transmit messages to the brain. These messages are transported along nerves as an electrical impulse. In order for a message to be transported along the nerves, there must be an ion potential around the nerve ending. Once an ion potential has passed into a nerve as a response to a stimulus, the ion potential must be rebuilt before another message can be sent. ATP, which stands for adenosine triphosphate, is necessary to rebuild the ion. Cells need oxygen and glycogen to produce ATP. Oxygen and glycogen are delivered to the cells in the bloodstream. And the conclusion, therefore, is without circulation, oxygen and glycogen cannot be delivered to the cells. Therefore, ATP cannot be produced. The resting potential of the nerve cannot be restored. Therefore, the nerve cannot fire if there is no circulation. So, end of the story, no circulation, no nerve function. If you have just reduced circulation, you will have reduced nerve function. Inhibited neural function. Now that you understand how nerves work, it is easy to understand how a nerve can be inhibited in a horse that has shoes. Shoes cause contraction in the foot. Contraction causes circulation to be reduced because the hoof mechanism cannot function properly, if at all. As a result, the horse's limbs will not receive adequate blood supply, therefore not getting oxygen and glycogen necessary to produce ATP. Vibrations from shoes damages live tissue. Horseshoes vibrate at 800 Hertz. That is quite a bit when the horse moves at anything more than a slow walk on hard ground. Vibrations at this frequency damage capillaries, reducing circulation. We see this happen also in dentists and in jackhammer operators. They have the same symptoms as horses that are in shoes for a long time. Their capillaries get destroyed, and therefore they don't have enough circulation in the very peripheral areas of their fingers. In the horse's case, it's the peripheral areas of the feet. Often horses shod or trimmed by conventional methods will have heels that are too high. High heels also reduce circulation. As a result of the steep angles, arteries are pinched shut, not allowing sufficient blood flow to the foot. Another problem is that in conventional methods, bars are not trimmed properly. Sometimes when the bars get long, they will push up into the hoof and bruise the corium. Long bars also keep the sole from drawing flatter on weight bearing, further on reducing circulation. So when you understand all of this, then you do know why it is not just a fad that we keep the shoes off, that we turn our horses out, that we allow them to move around, and that we try to keep all the tissues and all the parts of the body in good working condition. This is a rather interesting idea, especially in racehorses. Racehorses are probably the most challenged horses in the sport horse industry. Nobody, no regular athlete thinks of lying in bed for 23.5 hours and then getting out and doing a sprint and then going back to bed, taking a shower and going back to bed. That just does not occur to any human athlete. However, in the racehorse industry, it is done again and again and again. These horses are stalled from a young age on and only taken out to exercise. And that, especially for an animal that is made to move around all day long over large distances, that is inconceivable how this works altogether, and that it doesn't work shows how many horses get injured on the racetrack. But that's beside the point. So much for tonight about histology and the equine connection. And now let's go on to how can stance problems be alleviated. Last week we talked about conformation, how horses are towed in, how horses are towed out, which walls are higher when they are towed in, which walls are higher when they are towed out. Just to remind you, usually the horse walks around the longer wall, so a horse with a long medial wall or high medial wall is towed in, while a horse with a high lateral wall is towed out. In general, there are always exceptions to the rule, and because as soon as I say this is always so, somebody comes up and says my horse has a lateral high wall and he's towed in. We have seen this happen, and that's why we don't make blanket statements, or very few blanket statements. Blanket statements like ATP is necessary to reduce to restore the nerve function, the resting ability of the nerve, and therefore the nerve function. That is a blanket statement that you can take to the bank. But high wall here or there does this or that cannot always been taken like this. This is a drawing, and I also know there are some sticklers in the audience, and they'd say, well, it's not level to begin with. It's as level as I can make a drawing. The world isn't perfect, but it's supposed to show you that the hoof is level, and this is what we're basically looking for. Now we have a little thing here, and I would like to call on the one or the other of you, and you tell me, and I do this randomly, this is not a preference thing. Barbara, would you please tell me what you see in this picture? Barbara?
Yes?
Would you please?
You hear me?
Yeah, now I hear you.
Oh, okay. I see the left heel's higher.
Okay, we have done this before. Let me do this again. One moment, please. Left is on the left side of the picture, right is on the right side of the picture, because you cannot say which foot this is, not from the picture. Yes, just so we all talk about the same thing. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Yes, I see that the left is higher, and there's no scooping on that side like there is on the right. It looks to me like the right side, though, is longer.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
No? Good. Thank you, Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
Or Bob. Candy. Oh, Candy has no microphone. I always forget this. I'm sorry, Candy. Denise, what do you see?
Oh, hello. I think that the horse's heels are quite contracted, and on the right-hand side particularly, it looks like there's a bit of a fracture. Do you see what I mean? Just yeah, I think yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, I think that could be like a fracture, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
And I agree with the two things that the other lady said.
Okay. So one said the left heel is high, one said the right wall is long, and one said there is more scoop here. There's no scoop here. Yeah. Let me call on one more person. Let me see if there's somebody else. Jennifer?
Hi.
Hi.
Well, I concur with what everybody said so far. The frog also it looks, to me, as it goes into the back of the hoof wall, it looks a little deep and grungy. Like, I don't know. It doesn't look as clean and dry as I would anticipate.
Okay. Thank you. And Rose.
Okay, the right side of the hoof, of course, has all, because it's longer, it's flared, so it's got more happening, more hoof on the right side, and also the right side is lower than the frog, and yeah, the frog is quite contracted.
The right side is lower than the frog.
Yeah, I'm seeing that. Yeah, it's lower than the frog.
What, here or where?
Okay, well, you know where you have the circle around
Uh-huh.
the frog, and follow it to the right, to
Uh-huh.
going to the right heel point, and I'm seeing it higher than that heel point. So so the right side's a lot lower, but still the frog's a
You
bit
see
higher.
this higher than this?
And the heel point.
Okay.
And then also there's seems to be way more foot on the right side because it is a longer side, so it would be a flared side.
Okay. Okay. Good. Everybody had, not everybody, but we had quite some opinions about this foot. I would like to show you a few other things. When whoever took this picture, they and cropped it to view, they made it pretty level here with the top of the picture. This is not the way to look at a foot. You have to actually look at the foot and make it level in the heel, in the hairline with your, tonight I cannot draw this. I did it already twice today and it went well. So, that's better. So now that I put this line in, I hope you see that this is by no means level with the bottom of the picture. And when you now turn your head a little bit, then you have a different view. If you make this the base of your picture, then you see that this wall is longer, this heel is higher, this wall is also higher, because look how far it goes here. And this heel here is quite squished together as a result of this whole area being longer and higher. And if you take all this away and look, you would also have a longer toe here. Some of you said that this was flared. If you look at the white line here, there is no flaring. This is a totally connected white line. Without white line separation, you do not have a flare. That's the way the hoof is. Okay, so keep that in mind. We will talk about white line separation and flares more, and it will maybe become more obvious. From this picture, I can't tell if this is a crack or not, if this is actually a viable finding. This could also just be the periopal. I don't know this. So, and if it is, there's nothing you can do about it. The frog is not the world's best frog. The contraction from this view, you have really frog going this way and frog going this way, and that's actually rather wide. It's fairly good. Fairly good. Nothing's perfect. And not on this horse at all. So now we have a little bit of different picture on this, and here I have it marked up. And what I'm really concerned about is the different length and height of the hoof wall here and the extra height of the toe in the front. And I put a little picture on the top left of the picture we saw before so you can see this. So what happens is if you have a high toe out here where these X's are, then this pushes that bulb a little bit more together. So by relieving this toe and shortening this a little bit so it is as short or as long as this side, you will give this heel some relief. And then by lowering that wall, you may give the other side, the other wall, some relief, because this high wall always will push the horse over on the low wall. Important message here as well: be careful how you judge a picture from a hoof from a picture. It is really not easy to tell. And you have to, over time, really develop an eye for what is important and what is not so important. And we will talk more about this as time goes on. Developing an eye is the most important thing. And developing an eye for balance or imbalances like this is really one of the big deals in trimming. It doesn't matter how pretty a Mustang roll you can produce. If you do not see these imbalances, you are not producing a healthy, well-functioning hoof. Remember the lecture about the meridian endpoints that lie on the coronet band are directly influenced by the length of the hoof wall and how the hoof capsule interacts with the coronary band is important for the stimulation of the meridian endpoints. And therefore it is really important that you have a level, balanced hoof wall all around. However, it is also important, and I will repeat this probably again, it is also important that you do not adjust a good side to the bad side. If you would look at this whole hoof, in a lateral profile, and this is a right front, so this is the medial side and this is the lateral side, and you would take a picture from the medial side, you would probably see that this is a pretty good looking hoof. You have all the right ingredients. Your heel height is correct, your toe height is correct, your backup is right. Then you take a picture from the lateral side and you see that your heel height is not quite enough. You don't have enough toe height. Your backup is still right. That hasn't changed. But you don't have quite enough toe height. So in such a case, you would not trim the better side down and make it as bad as the bad side. And I tell you what to do instead. But all of this requires really spending some time with a hoof, and if you don't see it in the beginning of your trimming, take your time, take lots of pictures, compare it at home, and we talk next time about how to take pictures and how to do a case study, and that will hopefully make some things clearer again. And then we talk about how to line things up, and that will give you at home, when you're not hanging upside down under a horse, a much better idea what to do with this hoof. And that's a learning experience. So in a regular, just unbalanced hoof, you have an overgrown hoof, you have just one side longer than the other. In order to balance this out, you start trimming on the higher side and just trim the higher side down. If that makes the hoof level, then you're done. You don't have to do anything else. Don't trim the lower side as well. That will just bring it back out of balance again. You just trim the higher side if possible, because remember you want to leave as much hoof capsule as possible without it being overgrown. But do not trim off more than what's absolutely necessary. So now you take the higher side off and you're done. This whole picture will tilt back to what we had in the first slide. The same thing basically from behind, if you can, if that doesn't bring that bulb totally to the ground, but usually it doesn't. You just take the higher side down, end of story. And your horse will sit level again, and at the same time he will have no further problems in standing crooked, being towed in, being towed out, or standing very narrow below or very wide, base wide or base narrow. He also will move different. And we had this question this afternoon. I always say the evening session is the best one because then I can already preempt quite a few questions. When you're trimming a horse, it is really important, especially when you don't know this horse, that you move the horse before you trim him, and you move the horse again after you trim him, to see what kind of movement patterns he has, to see what's happening with his limbs in flight and on landing. And you have to train your eye for that too, and this is not easy. The more you do it, the more you will see, and if you see nothing in the beginning, so be it. In defense of all the trimmers who are out there and may not do this, they may also, because they're not all trained, a lot of trimmers today are self-trained, just like in the farrier industry, or seminar trained, which is no training either. So if they don't do this, it may be because they don't know how to fix it, if it comes up with an imbalance. And they have tried this and it didn't work. So much just in their defense. It just may not work. Now, if you have a side that is already too short, on the short side, you can only shorten the long side so far. You can't go any further. And then you have to wait for the balance of the entire hoof to shift. And once you have this much here trimmed off, then that hoof will relieve this overburdened wall here and everything will start to come back into balance. But you can only trim a hoof wall so short in one setting. The other thing that you have to remember when you balance a hoof mediolaterally, and we will talk in a later lecture about balancing the hoof anterior-posterior, which means from front to back. If you balance a hoof mediolaterally, you have to take into consideration that the joints in the lower leg are all saddle joints. And because they are saddle joints, the lateral movement, the movement from side to side, is minimal. It cannot move a lot. So if you have a lot of joint adaptation, that means that the leg has adjusted in its joint capsules, in its fascia, in its ligaments to the crooked hoof. When you have that, you have to go with that balancing a whole lot slower. If you trim a horse like this and make a really crass adjustment to the balance, and the horse is afterwards utterly lame, then you did not see that this horse has joint adaptation, and you have just made this horse sore, which is again not necessary. You have to go slow with a horse like this. That has joint adaptation. And sometimes you can help them some with homeopathic remedies like arnica. The other thing you can do is some body work, but this is all limited as there is no muscle tissue in the lower leg, and usually the joint adaptation is in the lower leg. So there's not much help you can give them except trim judicially. And this is all theory we're talking here. Don't blame me if it doesn't work out for you. I'm just talking in theory with you here. What you can do when you have a higher wall that you cannot shorten any further because you're running into into solar corium, your wall gets too short all of a sudden. This is not working. But what you can do, and this is a very elegant solution to the problem, is you can thin the higher wall. If you think about abrasive terrain, and that the abrasive terrain takes off the bottom of the hoof wall like sandpaper, if you have a thinner wall, it wears slightly faster than a thick wall. So in such a case where you have a higher wall on one side and you cannot take it anymore down to adjust it, what you do is you thin that wall by rasping it vertically. But vertically, not all the way up here. Not to thin it like this, but just to thin it vertically. And that will make it wear a little faster, and it will come into balance almost like magic by itself. Trimmer wasn't here for 2 weeks. Foot looks more balanced. Well, it was what the trimmer did before he or she left. Okay? If you have a hoof that is out of balance and has no joint adaptation, the hoof is out of balance, the leg is out of balance, and you trim it correctly and balance it, the horse will stand straight afterwards and will have perfect alignment of the hoof or of the leg, or as perfect as it gets. Here we have a horse that had some joint adaptation, didn't come with quite perfect legs. You have seen this in the confirmation lecture last week. This is the 14-year-old Trakehner mare with rather huge ring bone. On the left side, this is how she stood for 14 years. She was thought to be towed in. She was sold rather cheaply, even so she was fairly well trained, second level dressage, and so they sold her for fairly little money because she was towed in. She had shoes on. Shoes just came off before she came to me. She was given to me because she could not be any longer ridden. So was the tail. I never saw her really be lame. She was a little uncomfortable after we adjusted the feet, but this is why I can tell you today to take it easy. I didn't take it easy enough on this horse. Wasn't necessary that she was sensitive or ouchy. Could have just taken it a little bit easier. The slower you take it in the beginning, the faster it goes later. Always holds true. But you see here that she has quite some ring bone, some bony addition here and here as well. Even so, this is at the beginning, this is halfway, and this is about after 15 months. But what you see in these additions here is purely a blemish at the end, because here she was moving with a very straight leg and didn't have a lot of problems moving-wise. Here she was still paddling rather wildly, and when you looked at this horse coming at you in a trot, you thought she has to hurt. This looked so bad. This went all the way up the leg. So it got straighter and straighter and straighter. However, the blemish of the ring bone stayed. That's just something that was there. And that is what I often was told in the past when I asked that in vet exams, in pre-purchase exams. I always want to know, I had no clue at the time, what this bump is on the pastern. And the veterinarians through the bank said, oh, that doesn't matter, that's not important. Well, it is important. A healthy horse that has perfect legs, not that this exists a whole lot, but does not have bumps on the pastern. Not on the left, not on the right. Not happening. If they do have these bumps, they have the beginning or the full-blown ring bone. And that should show up on radiographs all the time. But radiographs can be read a certain way or another way. So this is just about how to straighten a limb. It takes time, and joint adaptation takes movement. Lots and lots of movement. On straight lines, on non-concussive ground, it is not easy. And you as a trimmer have to be there at least every 2 weeks. If you think that you can fix such a imbalance with trimming every 4 to 6 weeks, you are mistaken. It's not happening. If it is happening, you had no joint adaptation. And the question also came up, do you have to manage this for the rest of the horse's life? Most likely. And then again, this is what good trim education is all about. You learn how to do this and you stay on top of it. Yes, for as long as you trim this horse. Do you have, once a horse has rotated and founded, do you have to keep an eye on it that it always stays backed up with a low heel? Absolutely. You can't just do this once and then say, oh, now I just don't look anymore. And once you have developed an eye for imbalance, this will always be foremost in your mind. So I hope. As a short formula, where the horse hoof points to, it needs to be taken off. So you have a wall that is on one side of the toe longer or thicker. You take that off, you back that up so that the toe is all around the same thickness again. And if you have a wall that is longer, you will also take this off, provided that the side that you take off is not as short as the other side, which was already too short. Do not adjust a good side to become an equally bad side, just so you have it level. We believe that the horses do utilize the side that is higher, if it is the correct side, more than the lower side. At the end of the day, this is something that you have to judge every single time you trim. There's no way around it. Here you have a radiograph with one wall higher than the other, and you see how this all doesn't stack up nicely. You have here a line, then you have here a line, and then you have here a line. And you see how this is not working. That bone here has already changed because the joint spaces are all the same. So there has already some big adaptation gone on. Now once you have started to lower this and you think you have a straight leg, please make another radiograph. Have the owner, as a thank you note to what you have done with this horse and how well he moves now, have them please take another radiograph that you can then put in your portfolio of, look what I can do. I think this is really important. Excuse me. And here you have a picture. When you look at the left side and you look at the hairline, it is fairly straight, and then you can barely see that the medial side, this is left front, the medial side is longer than and higher than the lateral side. But you also have to see something. This picture is not taking perfectly from the front. It is taking a little bit too far from the lateral side. And that deteriorates things a lot. If this picture was taken a little bit more central, then you would get a much better view of how high this wall here really is. So here you have the radiograph for this horse, and we have the same scenario that we had before. Excuse me, this was wrong. And then you see as well that this has some joint adaptation and is rather crooked. So to learn to see this may take you a while, but it's worth all the studying and to look and to measure and to put different markers on your picture. You can do this in Paint rather well. For PC owners, I have no idea what Mac owners do. I don't have a Mac. And I think of myself too old to learn a Mac. So this is these are pictures from the Strasser book, but they were the only illustrations that I have that are really this significant. Before trim on the left side and after trim on the right side, and the front feet are not as significant showing the improvement as the hind feet are, but the hind feet really are showing the improvement in balance tremendously. I wish this was made on a better surface, then you could see it even better. And eventually I will be able to dig out better pictures for this, but you see this all the time. In unbalanced hoofs, these so-named conformation falls, like the bow-legged horse. This is the same horse, just from behind. The bow-legged horse, before trimming and after trimming, his conformation fault is reduced by, I don't want to say 75%. He's still a little bit bow-legged, but that takes some muscular adjustment over time, and keep on trimming and give the hoof and all the structures that you know are inside the hoof and all the structures that are up the lower leg, they all need chance to adjust. And once they have adjusted, you will have a different moving horse. So that brings us to the end of this lecture, and I would now like to invite questions, and we see how far we get. And you know the drill. If nobody asks questions, I'm going to call on you. Good evening, Amy.
Hello, Claudia. How did I know you were going to call on me?
Well, because you went to the movies last time.
Well, I'm sitting here. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you wonderful, and so does everybody else. So be careful
Okay.
what you say.
Oh, okay, I'll make sure the dogs don't bark. What I was, could you explain to me, because okay, do not trim the good higher side to match the low side.
Yeah.
How does that work, and how does that bring up the low side to where it needs to be?
Don't trim it totally down. Thin it
Yeah.
and have the horse use it and move the horse on abrasive ground so that it comes gradually down while the other side has a chance to grow up.
Okay.
What I see, excuse me,
Go ahead.
what I see a lot is that in the quest to balance the hoof, the
Yes.
whole hoof gets trimmed off.
Yes.
We have already
Yes.
a too low side. Now we're going to trim the higher side to match the low side. Now we have no hoof anymore. Hallelujah.
I know, this is what I do with my horse, because it's funny, the high side, all the tubules are, the high side, the outsides of his hoofs are very beautiful, and the insides of them are completely underslung, and they're absolutely, the two sides of his hoof are completely different.
The
And he's always-
underslung is a different problem that we will talk about eventually.
Yeah, so, no, it's only on half of the hoof.
And I know, and this is a problem, and you need to be careful. I just want to say this:
Yes.
you need to be careful not to take the entire hoof off
Right.
and match it to the bad side.
Well, I know if I do that, he doesn't move well afterwards.
Yeah,
I've had him for lots of years. I know how much is too much.
yeah. But not everybody knows that who is on
Well,
this
and
call, and
I
this
wouldn't
is
know that on another horse, but I do know that on him.
yeah. So on other horses as well, be careful. You can always trim a little bit more the next time. And
Right.
I find when you take something like 2 millimeters off, the horse is already so relieved that he will balance this hoof differently and it will come into balance. If you take a whole lot off, he may be sore.
Right.
So
Okay,
we believe that the horse steps more on the healthy side than on the low side. And the underslung is another reason, another problem that we have to talk about, and it's actually rather important to fix this as fast as possible, and I'll show you how.
Okay, I'm going to, I just quit one of my jobs today, so I have lots of time to get new photos. And since his little incident with his leg, I have not trimmed him in about 6 weeks. And so he's quite crooked right now, and I thought, oh, I'm going to send you pictures before I trim.
Oh, okay.
Because there's lots of foot there.
I'm looking forward to this. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Still no hands up? Catherine, do you have a microphone?
Hi, Claudia.
Hi.
I do. Can you hear me?
Yeah, barely.
I don't know that I'm... Okay. Is that any better?
No.
Uh-oh.
Can you speak up a little?
I don't know how to fix it. I'm trying to speak up. Can you hear me at all?
That is, yeah, I can hear you, but I have to hear closely. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'll speak up. I don't know that I have questions as much as I'm just trying to take it all in, and it makes me want to go down to the barn and look at my horse's feet right now to see what I've been doing.
Yeah, and when you go and look with a camera. Take some pictures.
Okay.
It is so much easier to sit in front of the computer and look at the hoof. And you see things, and everybody agrees on this. All of us who take a lot of pictures agree, even those who take only a few pictures agree, that you see more in a picture than you see on the live hoof.
And why is that? Why does it
Maybe
look so
because you're
different
not hanging
photos
upside
than
down.
live?
Maybe,
Could be.
maybe it's because you have no strain on your back. Maybe your eye adjusts better when it is seeing something on eye level. I see a lot of things. Plus, I can blow up a picture on the computer way bigger. I have a 23-inch screen or 25-inch, so that picture on the screen is 3 times as big as it is in reality. So I see much more detail.
Yeah.
Yeah? And I do not lie on the ground in order to look at a hoof. That's just not my style. So when I have a lateral view of a picture on the screen, I can contemplate this much easier. And if you live where I live, I have to add, it's easier to see in the air condition than out of the air condition.
Very true.
It has cooled down now. We are having now overnight only 68. Only. It's down from 75, and during the day it's only 95, which is an incredible improvement. It's almost cold. So there. Does that answer
Thank
your
you.
question? Or your comment? Does this...
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Let me see. Jennifer asks, you mentioned longer bars in conjunction with traditional shoeing. If this is a problem, why does it happen and how does it cause problems? We will talk about bar contraction in a few lectures. Contraction is coming up right after we do the case studies next time. And contraction is a huge chapter, much bigger than what most of you probably think. We have a quite detailed view on contractions. But the bars are often left long because farriers do not regard them as a structure that needs to function, and quite frankly it doesn't function with shoes on. With shoes on, nothing grows the right way. I don't know if this answers your question. And if the bar is too long, it presses into the interior of the hoof, and it does diminish blood flow there. So if this has not answered your question, could you please formulate it a little bit different? I'd appreciate that. Yes, Denise.
Okay. I have a question about the joint adaptation.
Yes.
So to tell if your horse really does have joint adaptation, you obviously have to take radiographs.
Not
and
necessarily.
You mentioned looking at the... No?
No.
Okay, well you mentioned looking at the space between the joints.
Uh-huh. If you have a radiograph.
And so that if the...
Yeah.
Yeah, you seem to say that if the space between the joints was equal, then you have true adaptation?
No, then you have for sure adaptation.
Okay.
You know, like when you look here, in this joint here, I hope you can see this.
I can, yes.
Yeah, this, let me take this away. This is a very equal joint space. There's nothing
Yes.
wider here than it is here. But if you look up here, it is wider here. It seems to be wider here than it is here. Let me take that away again. See that?
Yes.
Yeah? So there is something going on. And when you have a plane that is one time going this way and one time going this way, you think you have joint adaptation? Or you have adaptation to the hoof? Now, if you have a crooked hoof and a straight leg, do you think that leg has adapted to the hoof or not?
No, I don't. I don't think it has. Is that right?
No, it has adapted to the hoof because the hoof is crooked and the leg, look at it, has become straight. The leg is fairly straight. Yeah?
Yes.
Considering how crooked the hoof is here. So that is joint adaptation. You have a crooked hoof and a straight leg. If you have a crooked hoof and a crooked leg, that's not joint adaptation. You take that hoof straight and the leg comes straight.
Okay. Yep. Obviously, I need to look at this a lot. Yeah.
Yeah? This is not, let me tell you all of the, let me tell all of you this. This is not getting easier. The easy part is over. Now I'm going to try to teach you how to see and how to evaluate things, and it makes you doubt more. It makes you hopefully more curious. It makes you hopefully see more. It makes you hopefully get more into this. That's what this is all about.
Yes. I have a horse that is towed in, more so on the off fore. The near fore seems to be quite straight. And he has been trimmed barefoot for about 2 years, but he continually tows in.
Yeah.
And I believe he's more towed in now than he ever was, even with the, coming out of shoes and then being trimmed. And so, we talk about this, and obviously he has joint adaptation, and I'm just thinking of getting him re-x-rayed so we can actually have a more in-depth look as to these joint spaces and to see what's actually happening there.
That is a good idea. Another good idea is maybe not this week, but after we have been through how to do a case study next week and how to take good pictures, you may just want to send me some pictures and get what we name a second opinion.
Yes, that would be good. And just, looking at your pictures, it's so critical and to get the right angle of your picture. I mean, that really showed up in today.
Yeah.
If it's just a little bit out, then you just see things so differently.
Yeah, and then when I look at pictures that are a little bit out, all I can say is I think. I cannot say this is. Unless the picture is dead on, I can just guess.
Yeah.
That's unfortunately the case.
Okay. Great. I love today. There's just so much information and so much to take in.
Okay. Thank you, Denise. Carla.
Hey, Claudia.
Hi.
I was just going to respond to the comment previously about how you can see so much more in a picture than when you're, there looking at the horse. And I think one of the huge advantages is that the image on your computer screen isn't going to move unless you move it.
Yeah.
And so for however long you need to sit there and take it all in, you can do that, and it just makes the hugest difference in the world. And I'm just putting out there, how valuable it's been for me, and being able to see things, looking at pictures after the fact that I didn't see when I was there. And the true value is that then you make a note, when I see this, of course, the next time I need to, make this correction or tweak this or that. It's for anybody that doubts the value of this, I just want to say I can't overstate the value of it.
Yeah. And I can tell you, thank you, Carla, I can tell you from the experience of our last student class that in some cases this picture taking is a rather painful process, immensely painful. They send pictures and I send them back and say not good enough, not taken from the front, not taken in a true profile. You need to center more on the middle of the sole, and so on. And it goes on and on and on, and it takes quite a while till you can take good pictures. I do not always take good pictures myself. I just take a lot. And there are some situations where I just don't have the right pictures to illustrate something. That's why sometimes I have to pinch it off the internet somewhere. Because I just can't show you this. I hope over time I will get more and more pictures together that I can illustrate this all with my own. But it's a process, and Gretchen has to say something about this. Gretchen?
Can you hear me?
Yes?
Okay. On the picture that's on the screen, was this x-ray before the foot on the left was trimmed, or was it even the same foot?
I was made to believe that it is the same foot. I do not know if it was made before it was trimmed or after.
Yeah, because there's a great big flare on the higher wall in the x-ray that isn't there in the picture, so I'm confused. And then I see left hind and right hind on the x-ray.
No, that's left hind. That's
left.
Yeah, but this marker.
Yeah, I'm just.
How that
just
goes.
Sitting here going like, what am I looking at?
Yeah.
And also the shape of the fetlock is in the picture it's leaning to the right, and in the x-ray it's leaning to the left, so I'm...
Well, but Gretchen, we don't have this from the total front. The total front is more here, This is...
Okay.
And that may just be a little bit confusing if you think that these ridges are equally away from the toe. They may not be. So there's a lot of assumptions, but I think what I wanted to do was to point out these discrepancies.
Okay.
Talk about joint adaptation. Talk about how bone changes. Not just joints change, but bone changes if it is long enough in existence, and what all you are looking at here, and urging everyone to trim carefully but diligently. That is really, to me, very important.
I had another question too. If a horse is touching his front feet with the hind feet as he's stepping forward with the hinds, what usually is causing that?
An incorrect breakover of the front feet. He doesn't get the front feet off the ground.
Fast enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Too long a toe, or some imbalance, that the toe is just on one side longer, and he just doesn't get the front feet out of the way, because they should be gone by the time the hind feet land.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah? Thank you,
So
Gretchen.
in other words, the lateral imbalance could do that too then?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Thank you, Gretchen. Somebody has a question. I have a question. Who is this? Rosemary. Rosemary, yes.
Hi, Claudia. This is concerning this whole thing about trimming live sole. So if you have an opportunity to see these horses that the feet aren't hydrated, you have a tendency to see that you know that the sole is thick, but when you look at them visually, they seem to be live sole. And I was just observing this over the weekend with some horses that I got a chance to look at, and I felt that if you took them and soaked these horses, that this what would appear to look like live sole would probably end up flaking off and would become a trimmable sole. Have you noticed this before? Like, have I made any sense?
If you
like these horses that aren't being trimmed at all, but they haven't been hydrated, so their
Right.
soles are
Yeah.
really thick.
and you know, if somebody doesn't have a lot of trim experience, and there are just as many bad trimmers out there as there are bad farriers. I'm sorry to say, but you know, if somebody walks around with a rasp and rounds the edge of the hoof capsule, that is not considered, in my view, trimming. But a lot of people do this, and a lot of people just have nippers and a rasp, and they just rasp something. First they nipper it, and then they rasp something, and they may as well be farriers that do pasture trims. That has nothing to do with trimming. When you get to horses like this, that have been treated like this, they may have from the outside a rather nice hoof form. Yeah?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then you pick the hoof up and you just fall almost over backwards. You
Well,
say,
yeah, you
what?
see it almost level with the frog.
Yeah, the sole is level with the frog. The collateral grooves are therefore immensely deep,
Yeah.
not because they have rotation or anything, but there is so much sole. Now, if you take this horse and stick it for 24 hours in water, in a boot, a lot of the sole will just flake out.
Okay, that's my feeling.
Yeah. But, you know, the other option is take a good sharp knife and give this horse a little bit relief by lowering the sole, by lowering the bar. That doesn't mean you have to trim to corium.
Yes.
Yeah, this just means you can relieve the
No,
sole.
not me. I never do that.
And we also will talk about sole contraction, which is one of the many contractions we identify, and what to do about it and how to go about it in the close future.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, and you'll be covering like the toe, the toe moon or toe sickle area.
Moonsicle.
Moonsicle,
Yes.
about the high, because I find a lot of imbalances are in that area and they just seem to be overlooked because everyone's looking to balance, and I used to too, to just balance the heels. So,
Yeah, we had this. If I may just go back on this. Hold on a second. There. This is a imbalance in the moonsicle area.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that toe is here definitely too long.
Yes.
Yeah? In
Yeah.
comparison to this toe. And again, I can only decide if I'm going to take all of this down if I see this hoof in profile from both sides.
Yeah.
And from the front. I'm not going to take this down just from this view, and then when I set it on the ground, I'm going, now I trimmed the whole hoof to short. Yeah, you have to be careful with this. I can't emphasize this often enough.
Yeah.
But this is one of these cases that you just mentioned, that here the moonsicle is not taken into consideration because everybody's just looking here and here, or looking here and here. Yeah? And that is a training problem as much as it is a seeing problem. I don't know if it is taught anywhere else, but if you belong do you belong in the group that had Jerry come over to trim?
No.
No.
Are we talking about Jerry down in Washington, or is he in Oregon?
No, when he came to British Columbia?
No, I didn't.
Oh,
no.
that's a totally different group. They are in Leolit, or however you pronounce this. They are closer to Kamloops.
Hey, so when did he come? When was he there?
Just before we start the course.
So he would have probably with Christine Martin. Did he go up to her area?
No, but he did some work for quite a few ladies there, and he also talked to them about trimming. But if you can get him anytime, or you can just make a trip down to Port Angeles and have him show you this. He's excellent at balancing feet, and he can exactly show you where to look.
Well, I know when I first started, I thought that was a very difficult thing was, to learn to have that, to develop that eye, but you can develop it. But the scary thing that I realized is a lot of farriers didn't have that eye, don't bother developing it.
And neither do a lot of trimmers. That's what I'm trying to say. Taking a weekend course with however important that name is not cutting it in learning all these details. And this is just the beginning. Today was just the beginning of a long, arduous way of looking at hoofs. There is so much more than what you first thought, than what I first thought when I got into trimming. When I was rather overwhelmed with all these options. That is why I try to put them a little bit more in a logic progression so that it goes from one thing to another. But the easy lectures are all over. You thought that anatomy was difficult. That wasn't difficult.
Yeah.
Now we're going to get into difficult territory.
Yeah, no, I have one horse, Barley. I've been looking at him for years and I can't figure him out.
Send pictures.
Yep. One thing, I just wanted to say one more thing about the race horses, what a bad time they have. But, there are all these, you hear about the bleeders on the tracks.
Yeah.
And it's their lungs that bleed, and they're now realizing, they have had that information for quite some time, that it is the concussion of the shoes that is actually causing them to bleed in their lungs.
Yeah,
so
and,
one more thing.
Good old Hiltrud Strasser says this already for the last 20 years.
Oh, she figured that out a long time ago?
She said this from the beginning. That was in her teachings from the beginning, and nobody listens.
No, it's very sad.
And then they find this all out by themselves.
Yeah.
And then it becomes self-evident. And the great philosopher Schopenhauer has already formulated it like this. First it is vehemently opposed, then it will be researched, and it will be will become self-evident after they have made it their own discovery. Yeah? So this is the way the world turns, and this goes with everything like this. I cannot tell you how many clients I had where I said the same thing over and over and over again. May this be in the hoof care world, or may this be in the riding world. And one day, after 100 repetitions, they come to me and they say, "You know what I just discovered?" And I'm just floored. This was exactly what I talked about all the time, and they discovered it all by themselves. So that seems to be normal for humans in general.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. Yes, Barbara.
Yes, can you give us a little bit insight on your clinic this weekend?
Yeah. No way around that one. It was And this is I'm gonna talk about this. Thank you for bringing it up. And this is the last thing we're gonna talk about. We're basically done, except that I give you a little synopsis of what happened with Brian Hampson from Australia. Brian Hampson is finishing his PhD study under Chris Pollitt. He started this PhD study when Chris Pollitt was still an active professor at the University of Queensland in Australia, and short after that Chris Pollitt retired and then started to go with Brian Hampson into the bush to research and study the brumbies in a scientific way, not just, willy-nilly, oh, we're going to observe them and we're going to sit there with magnifying glasses. They did a whole lot more. They tracked their movement by putting GPS collars on them. They shot them with a tranquilizer gun and put the GPS collars on and gave them an antidote to the tranquilizer, had them run again, and then after however long it took them to recapture them, because that isn't easy. You can't just stand around and wait till they come by and shoot them. They are not always going the same track, so they have spent actually months in the bush, and then they recaptured them, and then they superimposed these tracks on a Google Earth map, and with the software program they could tell exactly where the horse was at what time, within I think 5-second increments. It's rather sophisticated, and they watched these horses move about in the Australian desert, and they have 6 sample regions with different terrain. One is desert with really packed hard ground, like rock. The next one is also desert, but over more than 100 years these brumbies have worn paths into the desert top, and therefore where they are walking is actually rather soft. Not soft, but a little cushier than all the surroundings. And you can see these tracks like our interstate for miles from the air. They always move on those same tracks, and they always move single file. This is then they have some area in the northern part of Australia where they actually have a lot more forage and softer ground. Then they have one control group in New Zealand that is also a native feral band of horses, and so they have 6 different terrains, slightly different. One area where it floods for 1 month out of the year and everything is underwater, and then all this goes away again and turns back into hard, dry substrate. So they watched these horses, they took measurements of the feet, they took measurements of the stomach contents. They also, in order to understand how many feet they can measure and actually take back to the university and x-ray and take apart, is you have to understand that there are 2 million brumbies in Australia, and I think twice as many camels, and they reproduce in such a rapid rate that if the Australian government leaves them alone, there will be in 4 years twice as many animals. So what they do is they take a helicopter and a machine gun and they shoot them out of the air. And they just don't see it coming much, except for the helicopter that they're frightened of. But they get shot pretty soon after the helicopter arrives. And it's a fairly painless death. They cannot have these, if they don't shoot them, they will starve to death, because they are now already at the point where around the water holes for 15 kilometers, that's 10 miles, there is no forage, period, because it's all eaten away by the camels and the horses. And so the government tries to do away with these horses by shooting them out of the air. And I am posing the question here, that's my personal take, wouldn't that be much more humane for the Mustangs as well, instead of driving them with helicopters into holding pens and keeping them there, some of them, for the rest of their life? So they go with a second helicopter after the kill helicopter and land immediately on these fresh carcasses and take the stomach contents and pack this up and ship it to the university and have the stomach contents examined and see how much what these horses live off, and they see the hoofs. And the interesting thing that came up in all of this that I took away from this was, do not take the Brumby hoof as your model for trimming. All these hoofs have pathologies. They are contracted, they are very upright, they are a lot of these horses have a distal descent of the coffin bone, also known as a sinker. A lot of horses have a rather shallow hairline, which lets us assume that there is some rotation. A lot of horses have pathology of the terminal papillae, and therefore the hoof is pushing out a lamellar wedge where it's not necessary. So out of 10 horses, they only found in one control group 2 horses that were reasonably sound from the hoof form, from everything they found when they took the hoof apart. So, and he said that he is not aware of any study that was done in the United States on the Mustangs of an equal magnitude. You know, just looking at horses from afar, and then so kind of taking the one or the other picture and drawing conclusions from this may not do the trick. He also found that horses with very thick hoof walls had all pathological findings. That with the thick hoof wall came a very stretched lamellar attachment, and the horses had as little as 1 centimeter of distal descent, which means the top of the extensor process was 1 centimeter below the coronet band, and as much as 2.5 centimeters. And they showed us a picture of a video of a foal that was newborn. As soon as it was born and could stand, the herd was moving to the water hole. By the time the foal arrived at the water hole, even so the herd was walking, and most of these horses walk all the time. There's not a lot of running going on. They also have no natural predators. And as these horses arrived at the water hole walking, the foal had to run the whole time because otherwise it couldn't keep up. The foal was severely lame. And now these horses do not water every day 3 times. They water every 2 to 4 days once. They have adapted to the conditions in the desert. And they now turned away from the water hole and were moving something like 30 kilometers or 20 miles, almost 20 miles, towards the foraging grounds. And you know good and well that this foal didn't make it. If it was already this lame at the water hole, it was not going to be less lame. And they have to keep moving to get to wherever they can find something to eat. They are not in general fat. They are looking rather like skeletons, and they are not the picture of health. They also had large worm loads, and the whole message in general was these horses are not striving, they are just surviving. And whenever it goes a little bit better, they are reproducing. And once in a while every 10 years, they have a severe drought, which decimates the horse population tremendously, and they just stay by the side of the path and die from dehydration, from not having enough nourishment, and they just die there. And there are no predators that would take the meat off the carcass. It just mummifies. And so the Australian outback is littered with carcasses from horses, and they try to get rid of them. They have actually, I don't know if I said that already, they have more camels than horses that are roaming, and even if they think they shot them all, there's still more to come. And they are considered honestly a pest. And it was rather interesting, and if anyone, it had nothing to do with trimming. It had nothing to do with the domestic horse. It had everything just to do with the study that Brian Hampson has done on the Brumbies. He also found that that most of the horses had unlevel feet. That one side of the hoof was higher than the other. That one side of the hoof, front hoof, was more flared than the other. But he did not say this was healthy for domestic horses. And I'm wondering how many people are hearing him and are now saying, oh, imbalances aren't important. The Brumbies have them too. Or he said that most of the Brumbies had a 20-degree hairline instead of a 30-degree, and he was actually quoting Dr. Strasser, who is the only one who points out the 30-degree hairline, and says she must be doing something right because the European horses seem to do rather well with her model. Yeah, but she's not modeling anything on the Mustang or on the Brumby. She's modeling it on what works for the domestic horse and has worked for the domestic horse for quite a while. So all these things came up. He talked from 9 in the morning till 6 o'clock in the evening with a half-hour lunch break, and brought up a lot of information, and it was rather interesting, and I can only urge you to, if you have a chance, to go and see him. He's making tours all over the world in order to raise money for more research. That's his reasoning for traveling around, and so he can expand that research. And I found it really interesting. It was also good to listen to somebody else talk hoofs for a day. So with this short synopsis, there's to put something in 15 minutes, a whole day into 15 minutes isn't, that's all I can give you at the moment. And I hope that I get in the long run some of his research papers. He said to email him for that, and I will as soon as I find the time, and then I can maybe, if we have a little bit extra space, can share some more about this with you. Thank you very much for tonight. I know it's got rather late. I will see you hopefully next week again, and one last sales pitch. I still have space for the course starting on Thursday, and if you have still some friends, or maybe Gretchen can make another post on the website, or not on the website, on our Yahoo group. I would appreciate this. There's plenty of space, and I would like to have some more participants. And I see all of you next Tuesday at 8 o'clock. Thank you and have a good night. If you are in Australia, have a safe day. Goodbye.